Hey guys, welcome to part two of Journey into Frank Dux. In this one, it's going to be more of the Defend Dukes. So make sure to check out part one, linked in the description below. It kind of summarizes this whole thing where I had a lot of people, his so-called critics, right? I don't know if I want to call them the anti-Dukesters per se, but people who aren't the biggest fans of Frank Dux, but they all had like some kind of relationship with him at some point. But anyway, that video was all compiled together. And then this one is when I started getting closer to Dukes' inner circle and then actually got to interview Frank Dux himself. So please give this video a thumbs up, by the way, because this takes so much work, man. And it's a very delicate balance of trying to remain friendly with all sides. Because look, I get it, man. Like if there's certain people that don't like Frank Dux and they see that I'm associated with Frank Dux, they like kind of look down on me to some degree. And in a way, I don't think that's fair, but I understand because there's certain people like I don't like, for example. And if I know somebody's associated with that person, I do kind of like look down on them a little bit because it's like, I can't believe you cool with this guy, right? Like I get it, just as a human, man. I'm trying to be better than that, right? But for me personally, like I don't have any issue with Dukes. Dukes is a nice guy. There's no reason for me not to like him. And then the other people that don't like Frank Dux, like Sifu Allen Goldberg or Sheldon Lettich, Don the Dragon Wilson, etc. It's like those are all really cool guys. I like those guys, right? Anyway, I'm trying to be that neutral party, right? As best I can. It's not easy, man. But I think it's worth it, especially for the viewers, for you guys, right? Like it's better that I can actually maintain these relationships because I could give you cool ass content like this. And despite what you say about Frank Dux, man, it's kind of fascinating. His story is very entertaining. And yeah, I mean, I always wanted to get to the bottom of it. It's not like I've always been, oh, it's all true or it's all fake. Obviously, truth with anything always lies somewhere in the middle, but it's like, how much is true? How much is fake? And how can we try to make sense of whatever? But on a deeper level, it almost gets philosophical of like just trying to figure out like what is true. Like from somebody's perspective, if they believe something, like to them, it's actually true. So, there's like a deeper philosophical thing going on here too. But anyway, we even talk about even like the Mandela effect comes up at some point. But anyway, let's get to the video, kind of summarizing the defense for Frank Dux. So I first seen you months ago, maybe almost a year ago, on a video with Frank Dux where he said I lacked ethics. And of course, you thought of the same of me as well. You and your buddy Johnny Sig.
I mean, there's a guy out there named Viking Samurai or something. He's inviting everybody on the show who could badmouth me, but he's never once spoken to me, which shows you his level of ethic. He'd go out there, ruin my hard-earned reputation.
Okay. So basically, you thought I was anti-Frank Dux. And the funny thing, because he said I lacked ethics, I really wanted him to get on the channel. I really wanted to meet him and get him on the channel and show him that I'm a fair guy and that I actually don't lack ethics. And I pursued that, and I got kind of close to like some of the people associated with him. So speaking about somebody closely associated with Frank Dux, Sky Benson, really great guy, really nice guy, great martial artist from what I can tell from examining him and talking to him. You can tell he's got like a lot of wisdom and knowledge. But anyway, here's our talk, right? Talking about Frank Dux, trying to get to the bottom of a few different things. So the first thing I wanted to ask Sky is, how was training back in the day with Dux-Ryu? Because nobody will question that Dux actually did have his own dojos back in the day. That's true. They may question other stuff, but Frank Dux actually did teach martial arts, and I wanted to know what that training was like. Like, were you guys doing pad work? Were you doing a lot of spar? Does Dux-Ryu have like katas? Like, what's like your typical?
Yeah, so we don't necessarily believe in katas. There's some simple striking katas and a couple kicking katas just so you get your moves out there. But as far as technique-wise, the system really doesn't believe in too much techniques because techniques are basically useless unless you know what's coming. And in a fight, in that instance, you never know what's coming. So to learn a technique against something was kind of ridiculous. It was more on reaction, action and reaction. It was more about getting in there and little battle test things. It was like, okay, throw a punch at this guy and, let's see what you can do and defend it. And then, a guy would get a punch thrown at him and he'd defend it and go, no, let's switch this up. Well, I want you to move like this and I want you to move like this and go into it more on this angle and that angle and, those types of things. So
yeah, that makes sense, man. Because I remember my traditional like karate Kempo training, like, okay, guy throws a right punch, then you do like these 5 moves. It's just like, realistically, nobody's going to do that, man. You know?
Yeah, so it was the basis of the class was basically an hour to an hour and a half class, depending, and it was pretty much, it was like 20 minutes of a warm-up, which was a pretty hardcore warm-up. I mean, it was pretty hardcore warm-up for 20 minutes. Then we had 20 minutes of class, and which was literally punching and kicking and taking punches and moving and getting out of the way of stuff being, just all kinds of crazy training. And then there was another 20 minutes of a burnout, which means another workout. So 20 minutes to begin with, and then the last 20 minutes was just a burnout to where, oh my God, you couldn't do nothing. And then about 15 minutes of relaxing and meditating and going over what you learned in class and any questions or answers, and we bow out for the day and next class coming.
So, of course, Sky Benson trained under Frank Dux. He was a student of Frank Dux. I wanted to know, asking Sky Benson, like, who was Dux a student under? Like, where did he get his training as far as Sky knows? I'm sure you probably had conversations with Dux in the past. Did you ever ask him, like, where did you learn your stuff? Like, did you ask him? Because I hear people say,
100%.
oh, he's like a green belt in Taekwondo, or he learned from this guy at a community college, or obviously Senzo Tanaka, right?
What? To honor you, Shidoshi.
Like, did he ever tell you where he picked his stuff up?
Well, he studied Shinto-ryu. He studied jiu-jitsu. He studied some Kempo. And other than that, everything else is self-taught. He's never.
But did he ever mention Senzo Tanaka?
Of course, he lived right across the street. He lived across the street.
So as far as you know, he did really train with Tanaka. So when you say self-taught, though, like, I'm sure he had to have gotten a decent amount of knowledge from Tanaka, right?
That was from what, 13 to 19. So it was about a 5 or 6 year period. But when you're a kid underage, you don't necessarily go to class every single day. And if you do go to class, you're there for an hour. So it's not like it was 8 hours a day for 5 years. So how much training can you really get? I mean, you could get a good concept of ideas and understand ideas and be able to implement ideas, but it wasn't like a daily training. You got to remember, Bloodsport was a movie,
A great movie.
Yeah, it was a movie, but your normal training, if you remember back when you were a kid going to class, it wasn't 8 hours a day, hardcore battle testing every single day. You were learning stuff, learning techniques, stuff like that. But I wasn't there. I had no idea the type of training that he experienced. I never sat down with him and say, hey, give me a typical day of your training. What was it like? I never did that. So I don't know what his training was like. All I know is he did study his jiu-jitsu. So he was learning a little jiu-jitsu with the ninpo aspects of what he learned from Tanaka and incorporated them both. So it does make a great story. That's, of course, why they were able to make a movie out of it all. But I always tell people this, the greatest martial arts artists in the world are those that never lost on film. So it's like they can say anything on film and it's Hollywood.
Yeah, sure. And of course, since Sky reached a level of black belt in the Dux-Ryu system, I had to ask him about the Kumite footage, because the story goes that Frank Dux would actually show that footage to his top level students. So the story goes that Frank Dux at one point, and we're going to discuss what happened to the footage, had footage of these so-called Kumite matches. And then people will ask, well, I never seen him. But the story is he actually showed his students who achieved black belt status this fight footage. So when you say you were, black belt level-ish, 86, didn't you tell me, and can you describe like the footage that he actually showed you back in like 1986?
Yeah, so there was two of us. I don't even remember the other guy's name. It's so long ago. I just don't remember. But there was two of us. We were brought back into the office. We were sat down, talking about going in and fighting at other schools and doing some tournaments and stuff. And we were always like, but how is it? What are the kumites like? What are these fights like? These underground style, bare knuckle kind of fights. 'Cause we, in class, it's not like in a garage somewhere and there's concrete on the floor. There's mats and soft floors. So, but when you start thinking about, oh no, I'm going to be in the dirt or I'm going to be on the concrete and I'm going to be, just knuckling it out with somebody, it was kind of scary to a point. So he sat down and he says, this is kind of what it's going to be like. Let me show you some film footage that I have done in the past that I don't like showing anybody because it is a little brutal. Mm-hmm. So we said, okay, that back then was VCRs, right? So he puts in this VCR tape into the, VCR. He had a TV in the VCR and he put it in and he attempts to show us some footage. It was like old home kind of movie footage. It wasn't like, digital quality or anything like that. It was like home movie kind of footage. And there was one scene where it was like a parking lot. There was another scene where he was in like this dirt, like a old baseball field or something like that, kind of seemed like. So it was a dirt. But there was scrapping, there was blood. I mean, I won't lie. I mean, it wasn't pretty.
And was there like a crowd though?
There was probably 5 or 6 guys standing around, as far as what I remember on the
not
video.
not like Bloodsport where you have like the audience.
No, that's a movie.
I'm just trying to see how close it could have been, right? Because obviously we all conjure up the image from the movie, right? So I'm just trying to figure out how close it would have been. Obviously that's dramatized.
Yeah, it wasn't nothing like the movie. I mean, it was just a couple of guys scrapping on the street, and it wasn't pretty. It was.
But real quick, Sky, did he give you any context behind the footage? Did he say, "I was in this fight because X"? I was in this fight because of this reason.
No, as far as I know, as far as what I could remember, I should say, is more like, hey, let me show you a couple things. This is kind of what you're going to be dealing with if you want to go into the underground fights and you want to get into this type of arena. These are the things that you're going to have to be dealing with. Let me show you, kind of a thing.
Now, going back to Adam McKinley and I had an interesting history, right? He saw me as the enemy, and we talked a little bit about that when I got him in for the interview.
Yeah, it was abrasive, and I was definitely, horrible to you. And I think that it was trash, honestly.
Oh, I mean, I respect that you admit that and let me know. And so basically your perspective is you literally thought I wanted to get Frank on to make him look bad. And that's where you were coming from.
That's essentially what I had thought. I knew that a lot of people out there were very questionable about Frank's past. I mean, let's face it, we're all martial artists. We've all heard the stories.
Meet Frank Dux, the first American to win the Kumite, a deadly martial arts competition where the only rule is to win.
We've all heard the debates. And I think that initially my abrasiveness towards you came from my trying to actually defend Frank. And I think that is now very important for both of us to kind of conversate with, because it was never you. I guess that I was just assuming that, because of what I had been dealing with, because of various weeks before that you were probably just going to do the same thing,
Yeah. And Frank even told me you were one of the guys. He had a couple guys in his camp, but one of the guys that tried to talk him out of going on the show, which, the funny thing is, like, I was so close to getting him. And then about within a few days or a week of me actually finally landing this interview, he said, well, I'm not going to do the show. And I'm just like, what? I wasted all this time and energy and you're not going to do the show? Because in my mind, I know I'm going to be very fair to him. I'm just like, this is in your best interest in a lot of ways, even though you may not realize it.
Without doubt, I know now that you're a very fair person. I think that everybody can clearly see that, you have all sides of the platform on here, on your show. And I think it's great that you're giving everybody kind of that platform to speak for themselves, because I think it's really hard for the audience and everybody listening in to make their own assumption.
The cool thing about Adam McKinley is that he finally helped us get to the bottom of what was a once questionable thing regarding Frank Dux, the whole Senzo Tanaka thing. Like, people would say, oh, that's not a real guy, etc. But he was very indeed a real guy and had quite an interesting history.
Here's the thing. There are a lot of things I cannot confirm for Frank. I can't confirm that he was in the CIA. I can't confirm that he was, he went to Japan and he fought in the Kumite. Those aren't things that I can do. However, I can prove, because of your last episode with Michael Bisping,
Frank Dux gave the name of his ninja master as Tiger Tanaka. I mean, no points for originality on that one, let's be honest.
that Senzo Tanaka is absolutely a real person. And I can absolutely prove that his wife, Saya Tanaka, is absolutely a real person, and was able to actually get this. And I want to show this to everybody. This is from Stephanie Bayless, the archives director at National Archives. And as you guys can see here, this is the case file. So if anybody wants to check on it, they're welcome to. You can also acquire these packets for about $300 a piece if you feel you want to reach out and do that. But this is, again, the file folder title for Senzo Tanaka. So I just want to reach out to everybody and let everybody know that Senzo Tanaka is indeed a real person. He did indeed live in the area that Frank said he did. And again, this can all be confirmed. This isn't something that I am just telling you. There's a reason it's wrapped in ribbon and stamped. I haven't taken this or done anything with this or edited this at all. It is straight from the archives. And if there's any question or debate about this, you yourself can actually reach out and get this packet.
Real quick, Adam, is there a picture of Senzo in his packet?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I
let's
have
see him, man.
Senzo. So I have a couple of younger pictures of Senzo, but here is a really cool. This right here is Senzo when he's a little bit older. And we were also able to kind of confirm the signatures, and we took it to a specialist, and they are indeed the confirmed signatures that Frank was linking himself to. You know what I'm saying? Like as far as like the Tanaka lineage. Let me show you another one here. And again, I just want everybody to know it's kind of faded. I don't know if you guys can really see that.
Yeah, we could see that.
That's Senzo when he's a lot older. But it talks about, I mean, there's everything in here. I have everything from his lawyers to his application for permit to re-enter the United States right here. So
That's really cool, man. Let me, Adam, real quick. I have an interesting theory that I was going to throw out there eventually.
Sure.
What if, and in a weird way, this can make like almost everybody right. What if there's like some weird Mandela effect going on with Dukes? So like Don Wilson and Alan Goldberg could rewrite because in that version, like he really is a fraud. But there's a Mandela effect where like, you know, this stuff like appears where it's not just like there was a guy named Senzo. It's like, well, they kind of tie him and his wife to possibly being spies and, so, you know, him maybe being incarcerated and then just like tied to the samurai clan.
I want to say this. So I definitely believe in that Mandela effect stuff. I follow it like religiously. I believe that it's absolutely happening in the world. Like you can call me crazy, like whatever. I'm fascinated with it.
Sure.
But what's really interesting about this whole situation is when I got this packet and I was able to actually look at it for myself and then ask him questions. One of the other things, and I wanted to bring this to note, is Frank seemed to know that he worked at a cemetery.
Really?
And that was something that was something Frank said. And then when I received this packet, it does indeed confirm he worked at a cemetery. So these are the types of things that I want to point out to people. If you think that Senzo Tanaka is not a real person, it's not debatable because I have these right here, and anybody else can reach out to the National Archives and receive these. Again, this is not up for debate. He was a real person. I have his records right in front of me.
No, of course, I would eventually get Frank Dux himself on, and I had to ask him about Senzo Tanaka. You know, you talked about like some of the masters you trained with and taught you.
Shidoshi Tanaka trained me.
I got to bring up Senzo Tanaka.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So there's so many stories out there, right? Of like, I guess he lived in your neighborhood more or less.
Well, he worked. Yeah, he lived in my neighborhood. Well, he had a place in my neighborhood. He lived up in many places. He had multiple families. He was a real ninja. That's all I'm going to say. The guy, you know, he did many things, and there's a record to prove it. That's all I'm going to say at this point. Okay?
You have pictures of him too, don't you?
Yes, I don't have it actually. The person that has all that stuff was Adam McKinley, and this is what's so funny about it. Adam McKinley went looking into me because, you know, and his wife is the due diligence expert for the UN. Mm-hmm. So she has access to the databases and the archives that normal people can't access. And she was able to get, you know, his pictures, all these things. But here's the interesting thing: at the same time, it's not that hard to get, because you can go on Ancestry.com and you can look up Senzo Tanaka and you'll see his picture.
Oh, his picture's actually on Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the stuff that she got was more along the lines of like, how does a guy 53 years old end up in the U.S. Army at the height of World War II and is operating out of Hawaii? Okay. Kind of raises some questions there, you know? And then you do some more digging and you find out Senzo Tanaka is a graduate of the Nakano Spy School.
How did you actually meet him, though? You didn't try to steal his sword like in the movie, right?
I wasn't going to steal it.
Well, I met him through, it's a long story, but basically he came and saw me participate in a jiu-jitsu tournament.
You have fighting spirit.
Okay.
And this is after I had gone to see the Black Dragons in Chicago, and there's a story behind that too. But essentially, I was invited to train with him and his nephews at that time, and so I did. That was basically it. As a favor to other members of the Black Dragon Society who were trained by Senzo Tanaka. John Keane was trained by him, Lawrence Day, Michael Felkoff, Ernie Reynolds. I'm trying to think of some other names right now offhand, but I can't. You know, I think Dick Moore ran into him a couple times. I'm not sure, but on that one. But yeah, they were trained by him. He's the reason that Keane, you know, basically called his group the Black Dragon Fighting Society, because Tanaka was a Black Dragon. His buddy was Major Takai. He was a Japanese major who was arrested in Chicago as a Black Dragon for spying during World War II and was put into custody in 1943. And some people think that Tanaka was actually a double agent, and actually that's how they knew he was an agent.
Interesting. So obviously in the movie, Senzo Tanaka gets all the credit for the Kumite, and you want to honor him, at least in the movie. How much credit do you give him for developing your martial arts skills to win all these matches?
Tanaka was brilliant at teaching me the nuances of martial arts. There's certain nuances, like on how you do leverages, what you do, certain strikes. He gave me the tools to go fishing. In other words, it's sort of like, if I give you fish you eat for a day, but if I teach you how to fish you eat for a lifetime. And he basically taught me how to fish. That's the best way to put it.
Okay.
Because every man, and I believe this, and this is why you see it in my systems and my students, every person in my system has their own logo within the triangle. They have their own spirit animal. And that's because you are your own system. No man controls a system. Not really. No one owns body biomechanics. There's only so many correct ways you can throw a punch or a kick, okay? And it's limited by your body biomechanics. That's a simple truth. Now, some styles have discovered one way of doing it. Others have discovered another way to do it. Some emphasize doing it one way. Some emphasize doing it another. But ultimately, when the moment of truth comes, it's going to come down to you as a human being and your personal experiences, skill sets, and etymology that will determine the outcome.
And then while interviewing Frank, of course, the whole Zane Frazier thing came on. I kind of wanted to get his side of the story.
I had an offer, by the way, from a Saudi prince who wanted me to come out of retirement to fight for $1 billion.
$1 billion.
So when they told you that, though, what did you think? That's a lot of money. Did you consider it, or were you like...
I definitely considered it, but then that ended when I got hit with the brass knuckles by Zane Frazier trying to get me in the UFC. I'm at the booth, and I'm just signed up, and I'm signing an autograph for a young boy. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I hear my name called. I turn my head to where it's called, and wham, I'm hit with brass knuckles. And you can always hit with brass knuckles because they had 4 skull indentations that that are in the medical reports. Okay. So I got hit with them. I got hit. And actually, to be fair to Zane, I could have been hit later with the knuckles because I didn't end up just fighting him.
Right? Oh, so he may not have had the knuckles. Somebody hit you with brass knuckles, but not necessarily Zane Frazier?
The only impact I had there, remember I told you, I try to be a really fair person, okay, to things. Everybody else who saw me got hit say I got hit with brass knuckles. So he hit me with brass knuckles.
Oh, so you based it off of what people told you. Like, obviously, you're not going to see that yourself.
And the medical report that shows I got hit with a blunt instrument. There's no ands or buts about it, okay? I mean, you can see their pictures, and you see 4 perfectly square, indentations on my face and the lacerations from it. It's, knuckles don't cut you. They don't pierce your skin. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. This is actually, pierced from like being hit with an object, that has a sharp edge to it, or a flat edge. And so I got hit, and immediately I saw a kick coming, and I jumped in front of the kid, took an inside hit with a leg kick to the inside of my thigh. And I remember what my attorney had told me to show you my composure at the time, because Zane had been pursuing me for a year. He says, whatever you do not throw a punch, don't throw a kick. I know you can do this, Frank. Just tie him up and contain him until the police get there. In other words, just basically grapple with the guy. Don't even throw a blow. And I never threw one blow. I could have knocked him out 3 or 4 times, believe me.
So real quick, Frank, you got hit, possibly with brass knuckles, maybe not. You got hit. Were you on the ground, or were you still standing up? Because I think you said
still standing up.
You were still. So you didn't get knocked down to the ground.
No. Let me tell you what happened. So, and I really believe I got hit with brass knuckles, to be quite honest, because the way I went, but because I'm so trained, when I got hit and I felt that impact, I knew how to roll. I immediately knew how to roll into. Sure. I do demonstrations. You can ask Francisco about it, where I'll have guys, champions, come up to me and I'll say, kick me in the head as hard as you want. And I'll stay there, and they will. No, they'll kick me. But I am so good at being able to take the blow and glance it. And I show people, when I train them, how to take a blow, how to take the impact and roll it and allow that kinetic energy not to go through your skull to your brain, but how to kind of like make it more of a glancing blow. Mm-hmm. And this is a very important skill, I believe, if you're going to be a fighter. You have to know how to take a hit. And most people do not know the art of how to take a hit. It's practically a dead art. I talk to people, of your generation. Nobody knows what the hell I'm talking about. He kicked me. I, took that, and then all I did is I grappled with him and took him to the ground, tied him up, and I had him in a position where I was about to throw a triangle choke on him. Next thing you know, he's trying to gouge my eyes out. And I'm getting kicked in the ribs. I'm getting kicked in the legs. Someone tried to stomp my ankle. And I'm fighting.
Part of his entourage, or do you even know?
His entourage.
Okay.
There's a guy, Steve Williams, who was there, who, quick thinking, grabbed Zane's hand to prevent him from being able to gouge out my eye. Okay. And I fought my way, and all I need is that just one little break, and then bam, I was up on my feet, and it was me, and the cameras had it. I mean, the CC, me holding my own against 3 or 4 so-called UFC fighters who appear, I won't mention their names, but who appear later, one of which was Chuck Liddell, but he wasn't really fighting me so much as he was trying to just kind of get in the way of some other guys. I really believe.
Interesting.
That's why I want to make that name clear. But other guys, no, they were kind of were trying to work me over, to get that knockout or whatever. Try to get me to fight, and it was really obvious that if I had hit Zane Frazier, he was again going to sue me like he did when he worked for me.
And obviously, Frank Dux, he's basically intertwined, synonymous with the movie Bloodsport, right? So at one point, him and Sheldon Lettish were actually friends. And, even though Frank's not credited on the script, he did say he co-wrote it, I believe, with Sheldon. And we talk a little bit more about the background, how basically, I guess it was supposed to be written as like a true story. And there were certain things that Sheldon put in the script to not make it a true story. And then they had to take that stuff out. So anyway, here's Frank explaining some of that.
Sheldon has to create this image of this being a creative work by him. Otherwise, the truth of the matter is he's a glorified stenographer for Bloodsport, because the characters all came from me. I had my original treatment screenplay, and when he was using me as a source, I was using that and relaying those story elements to him, which he bargained away from me. And all the evidence proves that.
Email shared to me, written by Mike Frankel. He says, Sheldon, your contract says you were a work made for hire. Therefore, by DeSalle license, you were only authorized in your contract to write about true incidents in Frank's life. Otherwise, you were in breach of contract, as was DeSalle. That is why we had to modify the contract with Canon, because I threatened to sue them over the theft of the sword in the film, which according to Frank Dux never actually happened in real life.
I wasn't going to steal it.
Also in that email, Mike writes, Sheldon, you did not write Bloodsport from a conversation with Frank. He had a full story that was shown to other people in the industry before you, and he found to sell. Also, according to your contract, you had the license to write about true incidents in Frank's life that he would have to share with you. I am too sick to deal with both of your bullshit. You had an absolute right to write the script and get written by credit. I was there when you agreed upon that, rather than the original agreement to co-write the script with Frank, as you did with Alpha Deuce, as your compensation for bringing in money.
When did you and Sheldon Lettish meet?
We met approximately, I'd say, at the end of 1982.
So real quick, though, you're saying you already wrote Bloodsport before you met him, but it was called, like, Revenge of the Ninja?
Return of the Ninja.
Return of the Ninja.
Yeah, and I even sent you last night, if you have a chance to go through your things, I sent you the WGA registration form, and I even sent you a letter of inquiry from my attorney to Peter Deal, if he remembers, if he could provide testimony to what was happening and how that Bloodsport came from me, and you have that letter as well that proves that I'm telling the truth here.
But Sheldon did have some association with Bloodsport, right?
We were co-writers on Bloodsport.
So you guys did write the actual screenplay together.
What happened with me and Sheldon is, we had been writing a number of screenplays together.
There's no denying that Sheldon Lettish and Frank Dux were writing partners. Sheldon Lettish even told me some of the things that they wrote together. Here's two projects, for example, that were registered. This one, called The Naked Kill by Sheldon Lettish and Frank Dux, is dated March of 1983. And here's another one called Alpha Deuce Story, also by Sheldon Lettish and Frank Dux, dated December of 1984.
When he wanted to be a director, he did a film called Firefight.
Okay.
I helped pay for Firefight. I helped him in Firefight.
Yeah, he actually mentioned that, sure.
Okay.
Which is actually, he even put up a little bit of money for me to make this movie.
He wouldn't have had Firefight if it wasn't for my participation and all the contacts I already had in Hollywood through Hubie Kearns, who's a Stuntman Hall of Famer, who taught me filmmaking.
Oh, interesting.
Now, as far as the movie Bloodsport goes, obviously it's about the tournament. It's about the Kumite. So I had to ask Frank about the Kumite. Try to make sense out of it, right?
You got to understand, you can't compare apples to oranges, okay? This is not MMA.
Mm-hmm.
This is not boxing, okay? This is not tennis, all right? Where it's one-on-one and you have brackets and you have a tournament and you can go from a single bracket to another bracket and then you're eliminated all the way down. Kumites are run in a variety of ways. A good example of that is Masayama. He had 100-man kumite. He fought 200 men over a 2-day period.
That's great.
Nobody has a problem with that. Nobody has an issue with that. Somehow I have 300 over my career span, which is dwarfed by Oyama. people find a problem with it, and that's because they're dealing out of ignorance. The Kumite, just is going back to like when I first talked about it in Black Belt magazine. It's a learning experience. It's a rite of passage. It's not a contest about putting butts in seats.
I guess there's like a misconception, because let me give you one of the big arguments that they'll make fun of. For example, they'll say, and this goes with the consecutive knockouts, and I'm sure you've heard this argument. They will say, in order for Frank Dux to knock out 56 men in a row in one tournament to win, the number of people in the tournament will have to had almost be infinity. So every time you want to add a round to a bracket, you have to double the number of competitors. So some guy on YouTube and on the internet did the math and said there would literally have to be like 74 quadrillion people. So they're just thinking about it completely differently than basically how you explain this thing works.
Well, here's the thing. They're working with the framework that they're used to, which is a kickboxing match, MMA match. You fight the guy, you win. You move on. Or even in some cases, some karate tournaments, but you're not fighting, 60 bouts in a day. You might fight like 8 bouts, So it really depends on what your pool is, of course, to work with, and whether it's single or double elimination. You don't have to have that many people. You do it as a triple elimination. We can even work it that way. The numbers go down when it's based on how many elimination bouts you have to fight and who you go against. Maybe I lose against this guy, but I lose against the other 2, so therefore I'm eliminated. The guy I beat, he gets to go on because he beat the next 2. It can go on and on. So when we talk about this math, it really doesn't hold true unless you really are looking at, well, what were the rules of the day? What was really going on? What was the real format? And traditional Kumite matches, if you really pay attention, when they're done tournament style, it's always fresh fighters, and then you're limited to like 3 to 8 different matches at the end of it till your winner's determined.
Okay. Now, of course, I had to ask Frank Dux about the Kumite Trophy, because that was the thing that like always threw me off. If it's a secret tournament, why are they going to give somebody a big trophy, right, to show off?
Because I was just starting out, and that's how I ended up with that trophy. It was really a gag.
Okay.
In fact, there's such a gag. They put the Olympic rings on it, and they didn't call it the World Olympic Committee. They called it, I think, the International Olympic Committee, because they're based on the International Fighting Arts Association. And they did that more as a gag and to remind me that the real martial arts, as far as what we understand today, actually you can take it all the way back to Mesopotamia and the Greeks when they had their contests, and they had boxing, and they had what we call MMA today, took place in the first Greek games, Olympic Games. It was to remind me as a young guy. I'm 19 years old. Yeah. These guys wanted to educate me and say, look, kid, don't think this is only an Asian thing. This thing goes to all cultures. That's why we love it. Every culture has its own martial art. Everyone is touched by this. And they've all got their own competition. So don't get all caught up in yourself and think you're the end all and be all. And that's what it was. And it was really more of a humbling effect that they made it so big and they gave me such a big cup. It's like, don't have such a big head. That's what they were trying to say. The cup is a word for your brain, your head in Yiddish. And I think it was Michael Felkoff, who came up with that idea.
Okay, I mean that's interesting, because I was just thinking, I'm like, why would they give, like, I couldn't picture the Kumite guys making a trophy, right? But okay, so they did give you a sword, like was shown in the movie, and what they usually do. And that's how you ended up with the trophy, basically. Okay, that actually makes a lot more sense, logically.
Yeah, that's why it's restricted that way. And look, you don't think Mark DeSalle and the guys were saying, hey, let's put your trophy in here, Frank, and we'll put it on the screen. And I said, no, that's not what happened. I'm not doing that, And to me, my story really gets more interesting right after the Kumite, when I had that big trophy. And sometimes they'd make me lug it around. And it became a running joke sometimes with the guys.
Hey, wait, do you have the trophy in your office right here?
Yeah, I do, actually.
Can we see this trophy?
You can see it, right?
Oh, that's cool, man. That is cool.
And yeah, so it's right. It sits right up there, and it's just it reminds me, and it says World Olympic Committee, on it, the International Fighting Arts Association, and actually the plaque World Olympic Committee was added later after my school was busted into. Okay, and they destroyed the base.
Oh, wow.
And so it was rebuilt by the Moody Company, and that's why people think, oh, they made it for me. No, the guy rebuilt it. He actually had to take a look at the original one, and he had a woodworker there, and they did that.
Now, Don the Dragon Wilson shared a very amusing story about the time Frank Dux talked about he could dodge bullets right in front of like a group of people when he accepted this martial arts award. Obviously, I had to ask Frank Dux about it, and the way he described it, he described it in a different way than how Don tells it, but it's not like ridiculous the way he describes it, right?
I sat down and we were at an event, and I didn't even really know Don at this time. But I said, hey, we have a mutual friend in common. I said, Brent Ambrose. Brent is my student. Brent is the head of SWAT for Burbank PD. He trains them. I sent you, I think, a text from Brent to me when he heard what Don was saying. He was pretty upset about it.
So as far as that text that Brent Ambrose sent Frank Dux, it reads, much love and respect to you. You will always be my favorite and main instructor. And yes, I attribute you to making me faster than a speeding bullet. But in all actuality, I was faster than him raising his gun. That's what made me LCG. He raised his 92F and I moved from where he fired. And Don Wilson pisses me off that he makes fun of that. To get a little more clarity on this, I asked Frank what LCG meant. He said, it's short for specific techniques of lowering your center of gravity that enables you to maneuver without telegraphing, which I teach my students, and 92F is a U.S. Army issue 9mm Beretta pistol. He further says, LCG is how you can proverbial duck a bullet. In actuality, you're dropping faster and out of the line of fire than he can observe, orientate, decide, and act as in squeeze a trigger or adjust aim. My method works and saved Brent's life, and other officers he taught using my way.
You told me using any technique that works. To keep an open mind.
I told Don about how the newspapers say, policeman dodges a bullet, basically.
Okay.
An expression, he dodged the bullet.
To corroborate Frank's story, I'll post the article from the newspaper in the link below. But basically, to summarize, it says, gunshot narrowly misses officers' heads from the Los Angeles Times, dated June 6, 1990. A Burbank police officer narrowly escaped death when a gang member fired a gun at him from close range, so close that the officer's face was burned by gunpowder, but the bullet missed. And then it mentions Officer Brent Ambrose was treated for facial burns after the incident.
What happened was, because of the training I gave Brent, he was able to get out of the line of fire while the guy was drawing down on him. And that saved his life. That's what I talked about. That's a big difference from me saying, oh, yeah, you can shoot the bullet and I can get out of the way of it. I mean, come on. No sane person would say that.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed...
I look insane to Don, or he thinks people are stupid to think that I would say something like that.
In front of like hundreds of people, that would be interesting.
Yeah, no rational person would do that.
And this was funny. This was really interesting. So Michael Bisping came out with a video on YouTube, really popular video, talking about like the top martial arts frauds. And he said Frank Dux was number one. Now, I felt Michael Bisping did not put up a solid argument. So Frank Dux and I broke that down. So let's go over the list of some of the things he had said about you, calling you a fraud.
Frank Dux has more bullshit in his life story than Vito Belfort has steroids in his left ass cheek.
Really interesting with this guy saying I'm a fraud, and it's like, well, my name's on the side of the U.S. Navy SEAL manual, dude.
That is true.
I was just going to say, it's a regurgitation of the same old BS that these guys do, and it's all spin. What I find interesting is the evidence is out there. Okay, I took Soldier Fortune magazine for repeating the same stuff to court for libel and slander. They didn't use truth as a defense, which means everything that they were saying they knew was a lie. They argued because it was a public celebrity, they should be allowed to be able to say that stuff. That was their defense.
Go to his next point. This is a funny one because
Oh, by
This
the
is a
way,
very interesting one, Frank.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
said that you claimed to have a 75-mile-per-hour kick, and then he's making fun of it, saying that's faster than a cheetah runs.
Fastest animal on earth. It can move his legs pretty fast, but Frank Dux can move his legs faster than a cheetah's legs.
well, first of all, if I have a 72-mile-per-hour kick, I hope he doesn't think I can run 72 miles per hour.
75. 75.
Sorry. Oh, you said 75. No.
Yeah,
My kick was recorded with knockout at 72 miles per hour. That's with knockout.
Oh, okay.
I could kick much faster than that. Okay, but that's recorded with a knockout. They did that by checking the frame speed, which is like, I think 24 frames per second. I forgot what it is. Don't hold me to it. All right.
I think didn't they shoot with high-speed cameras too?
It's a different speed. I don't know if it was shot on a 35 or 40 or 8 millimeter or 16 when they did the film analysis. I just know that they had you can do it by, in those days you did it by frame speed. You could look at you know how many frames went per second, and you just had to count the frames. You just look at them and go da, 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 and then you could pretty much approximate what was going on.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's how they got that record. And yes, they had footage of it because they showed Blackout Magazine when they were doing their due diligence on me. The Black Dragons gave it to them. They counted the frame speed. They could show them what happened. I don't know what happened to that footage afterwards. I have a good idea of what happened to it. It was destroyed because they were going to go promote Stephen Hayes as this ninja, and ninjutsu was a martial art. And of course, I was saying, no, there's no such thing as ninjutsu being a martial art, which was a total, contradiction to what they were trying to promote.
Oh, Black Belt Magazine totally sold us on the ninjas, man. They even sold all that equipment, like grappling hooks, so we could like scale our neighbor's fence. But real quick, Frank, let me just point this out because this destroys.
Let me finish an answer, okay? So I don't want to. I know I'm digressing, so let me get back to what we're saying here about the kick, the speed of the kick. Okay. Anybody who's a real fighter, who really fights in the ring and has had some real quality opponents, knows that punches are flying way past 70 miles an hour. A good capoeira guy is kicking in the high 90s. Okay. A good taekwondo guy is kicking above 100 miles per hour. Okay, what's 72 miles per hour? It's not even. It's below that rate.
It's quite below, and I'll further add to that because there's a National Geographic Fight Science where they used all this like modern equipment and measured the speed of these kicks.
So I'm going to put a wireless accelerometer around your ankle, and that'll tell us exactly how fast your leg is moving when you're doing your kicks.
So, for example, Lateef Crowder, capoeira guy. They clocked him at 99 miles per hour for his kick. Simon Reeves' front kick, which are slower than like roundhouse kicks, 71 miles per hour. Levi Kratovich, Muay Thai roundhouse kick, 130 miles per hour. And last but not least, the fastest, Brent Foster, Taekwondo, 136 miles per hour. So when Bisping is making fun and saying, 75 miles per hour, it's like, dude, this Taekwondo guy was clocked at 136. So if anything, 75 is slow. But for Bisping, it's like light speed, and he can't even comprehend that somebody could kick that fast. But he's using a cheetah analogy as running. It's like, so he's got hit too much in his fighting.
No, he's reaching. He's like all these other guys. He's just trying to drive a certain narrative, and he's reaching, and he's finding any way he can to try to, misinform the public and mislead the public to make himself look intelligent and important. That's all that is. It's trying to grab. I have so many people attacking me through the years just to make themselves relevant. It's clout tracing. Bloodsport has brought millions upon millions of people to the martial arts industry, inspired people. What is Mr. Bismal done?
I'll tell you what he's done. He lost against the guy, GSP, who was inspired by Bloodsport, who was retired, who moved up a weight class, and beat Bisping. That's what Bisping has done or didn't do, I guess.
Yeah. So maybe that's why he's got a grudge against me, because the guy was inspired.
Yeah, that's actually pretty funny, man. So there goes the defense. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. And part 3 is going to kind of be the aftermath after I had Frank Dux on, because I had some other guests on, some critical of Frank Dux, and just, after defending him against Bisping. I got a lot of heat from that, man. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoy part 3 coming soon. The ironic thing is now that I've been fair and got his side and some of his guys, people kind of have the perception where they might have thought like you were like, I'm against Frank Dux. And now they kind of have the assumption like I'm just like drinking the Kool-Aid and I'm so pro Dux.